literally every single disease can be traced back to nutrient deficiency and toxicity causing the state of cellular imbalance called oxidative stress. And the most important agent of oxidative stress in the food supply is the seed oils.
Dr. Cate, welcome back to the Meat Mafia podcast. Excited to have you on. I know we have a lot to talk about, a lot to catch up on, so excited to dive in.
Thank you, Harry. I'm excited to talk with you about what you're thinking these days.
So we were talking a little bit before the conversation. We have this office in the east side of Austin, and our office is full of all these nutrition books, but I just wanted to make sure I gave you a proper shout out because your deep nutrition book is actually in our office twice because it's so good. So just wanted to thank you before we get going for all your incredible work that you've done with deep nutrition. And now I'm so excited to just dive into done with dark calories because I think that there's so many different aspects to what you did with deep nutrition that you just went so much further on with dark calories. So excited to dive in.
Yes, great. Me too. I've been obsessed about this book for 4 years, so I'm glad to be able to finally talk about what's in it.
So I think just as a place to start, so as someone I remember like I was at home back in Virginia a while back, and I was listening to Deep Nutrition on audiobook at like 1.2 speed. And then I came back and read the hard copy. And it's one of those books that I think had groundbreaking information in it at the time that it was released. And from there, you've now gone and written a second book. So I'm really curious what that leap looked like and why you felt so compelled to really go an extra step in terms of the topics that you're talking about in dark calories with vegetable oils and seed oils.
Well, with deep nutrition, I kind of focused on the big picture of what is nutrition and what isn't it. But I didn't really do the deep dive into how do these toxins in our food supply affect us and what are they? Like the profound amount of damage that they do. I didn't just have the space to do that. I really wanted to get to the concept of like root causes too of disease. Like a lot of people talk about root causes, and medicine kind of doesn't really give the concept enough like deep thought, and they just kind of spew out ideas, right? And so medicine comes up with the root causes, which are really risk factors. Like the root cause of obesity, it includes like not exercising enough, right? Or genetics. And the root cause of hypertension includes obesity and maybe some insulin resistance or metabolic syndrome kind of thing. So these are just truly not root causes, and they haven't really sorted it out at all. And I thought it was just quite important to do that because actually ever since writing Deep Nutrition in the first place, I've been wanting to talk about root causes. I had my original edition of Deep Nutrition that came out in 2009, had an index in the back, an appendix in the back that said the root cause of pretty much every disease is nutrient deficiency and toxicity. And that I wanted to put in the newer edition because I felt like it was just sort of a unifying principle, because it helps people understand that, all right, if we want to get to the root cause of any random disease, asthma, well, how does nutrient deficiency and toxicity play a role in that so that we can help people with diet? And what is what is happening as a result of these things in our cells that leads to the inflammation? The role of oxidative stress is not emphasized in medicine, even though all diseases have their roots in oxidative stress, but that's not even a risk factor. It's not considered a risk factor if in modern medicine and preventative medicine and cutting edge medicine. Even among the alternative folks that do a little bit better at getting to risk factors, they don't talk about oxidative stress as the single most important risk factor. But that appendix had to be removed. Like my agent said, that's another book let's not even bring that up. And so since that day that they said that, I've been wanting to write this book.
Mm.
I felt it was really important. And I was like, well, good, now I'm going to write a whole book about it, because literally every single disease can be traced back to nutrient deficiency and toxicity causing the state of cellular imbalance called oxidative stress, which pathologists and people who study the root causes of diseases see evidence of oxidative stress in every disease. So cancer, dementia, getting sunburns. I know that's a popular topic. Can you guys, gut health, right? Gut disease. I mean, all of it comes down to nutrient deficiency toxicity causing oxidative stress. And the most important agent of oxidative stress in the food supply is the seed oils today, because that's what we're eating, so many of them. And another thing that the other books didn't touch on was the sheer volume that we're eating. We're getting 30% of our calories from the hateful eight seed oils. And again, that's something that modern medicine hasn't explored. They don't even really know what seed oils are or why they're important to explore. So really, dark calories is my attempt to fix modern medicine. So I'm glad you like it.
Well, I can imagine people like Brett and myself are not part of your target audience, but some of the people who will be most excited to just receive the book, because it speaks to so many of the topics that we're passionate about. One of the things that you spoke on was this idea of chemical energy and the metabolism. And I think this concept that metabolic dysfunction is quite misunderstood. And you even mentioned like the medical communities don't really have the full picture like clearly outlined in terms of like why people are obese. And in the book, you had several pages talking about how the World Health Organization has identified obesity as the #1 health concern facing humanity, yet they still can't figure out what's causing it. And I think it's so interesting because if you look back 60 years ago, obesity wasn't even a problem. So you have to think something has happened in those 60 years. So, I'm curious, how do you start to unpack this conversation with those medical professionals who, can't really see what's happening?
Right. So, well, what I don't have a perfect answer for it, because it's not like I've done that and had massive success. I'm just going to be honest, because it's a big concept. People don't get it. A lot of times they're not even interested, or it goes over their head, but what I try to do is find some common ground that we can agree on. And sometimes I'll start with this. I'll just start with the fact that, we hear that we're eating more saturated fat, and that saturated fat is what correlates with heart attacks or obesity, or you name it. We hear this, but when you look at the evidence, it turns out that is not true at all. And what we're actually eating more of are these vegetable oils that are high in polyunsaturated fats. Do you think that's an issue? Right? And a lot of people don't even think that's an issue. They're just like, oh, interesting. Like they just don't know what to do to think through that problem. So I'll help them. And I'll say, I think it means we've been lied to about fats. Right? So like if I have sort of a Q&A, kind of more of an interactive discussion with folks, then I try to get people like at least on the same page about something. Like, so if these statistics are that we've are true, but we've heard the opposite, doesn't that mean we're being lied to? And then isn't that kind of important, since this is the bedrock of our preventative medicine, cardiology, our attempts to help people reverse metabolic diseases. And people will be like, yeah, that's kind of important. Yeah. And, a portion of people will have like what I think is the appropriate amount of curiosity and / outrage, because it is outrageous. But, disappointingly a little bit, some people have like these other paradigms that they believe in, and
Mm.
this clashes with that paradigm. And instead of diving down into, okay, which is the next conversation, which is, well, what is the root cause here? Like, why does this matter? Well, it matters because does it pertain to the root cause of disease? And they won't come down there with me. They'll just be like, well, everything in moderation, or, they'll kind of glom onto something they already believe. It's too big of a leap, too much of a lesson for a lot of doctors. And, but not all of them, right? So some of them will get curious enough and they'll actually read a book, and then I'll hear back from them and they'll be like, wow, this is, mind-blowing and very important. And can you give a talk to my medical group or something like that? But it's such a disconnect, and we're just not wired
Yeah.
at this age where, 30, 40, 50, where we've spent so many years invested in one belief system. Saturated fat is bad, cholesterol is bad, risk factors are what causes disease. Let's not think about it in any deeper level than that. It's just a little kind of late for a lot of folks. Like, I've talked to some really smart people who've written really important books, and they're like, wow, this seems really important, but I can't really understand it. I feel like I'm just too old.
Right.
And I'm like, just read it again then. I read your book, man. But
Well,
yeah, so there's like just a lack of caring in some ways, I think.
yeah, it's really easy to get coaxed into the um, legacy paradigm that is prevailing today.
Yeah.
Uh, I just, a lot of people just don't really question what's going on. They just go on. And I really appreciate your first principles approach to actually unpacking this issue, because clearly we're missing something if uh, metabolic dysfunction and obesity is driving all of these different negative health outcomes, but these things didn't exist a while back. So I'm curious to get your take on the origins of vegetable oils, and when did these start to creep into the food supply, and what did we start to see change after they started to become more pervasive?
Yeah. So, well, with the first principles, so the root cause is oxidative stress, and vegetable oils promote oxidative stress by two means, right? They are both capable of generating toxicity. And we see, rates of diseases correlating with their introduction into the food supply starting in the early 1900s. And we see rates of diseases accelerating as they increased in the food supply. And they really kind of took off in the 1950s, and there was another big increase since the year 2000. And they're promoting oxidative stress by causing cellular toxicity, and they are nutrient poor. So both of those things make it very difficult for our cells to be healthy. And like the first principle that I talk about in chapter 2 of Dark Calories is that health begins at the level of the cell. And it's a first principle kind of means something that it's really hard to argue against. Like it's something that is already well established or should be well established, depending on the state of the science. With medical science, it's not well established, but it should be. I think it, eventually would stand up to the test of time, because it's a common sense. If you have only healthy cells, all the cells in your body are healthy, you're not going to get sick. You could get an infection, but you're going to fight it off as well as you can. You can get squashed by a piano if you're Wile E. Coyote running around the Southwest. That would be the end of you. But there's still, you can still die, but it's not going to be a chronic disease. So chronic disease can't happen when you have fully healthy cells. And on the other hand, if your cells are always experiencing oxidative stress, then you can't be healthy, and some sort of disease is inevitable. So how does this tie us now? How does this take us to becoming overweight? Well, that was a question that I didn't really have an answer to until I saw two very important and fascinating pieces of evidence and started thinking about those and sort of putting like a hypothesis together.
Mm.
So one piece of evidence, well, obviously we are eating more vegetable oils now. I think I covered that, right? At the beginning of the 1900s, we got maybe 3 calories a day because they basically didn't exist in the food supply. And now we're getting 400, 500, 600 calories a day on average in America. Yeah, 3 ounces, 80% of our fat calories, 30% of our total calories. That equates to around, 4, 5, 6, 700, depending on how many calories you're getting. And so that's a big difference, right? So these things, first of all, they correlate with health problems, and that doesn't mean they are causational, but if there is no correlation, you can't have a causation. And I want to return to that idea, but because of some things that are in the conversation right now about sugar, which we've actually started eating less of in the past 20 years, yet we've been getting more obese. So I guess I'll just dive into right now, like of all the common food elements, the ones that correlate the best are the most likely suspects for actually playing a more important role in the obesity and metabolic disease epidemics, right? The ones that correlate best, right? So saturated fat, butter, zero correlation, not a problem. Salt, that's often, blamed for lots of diseases, hypertension. But we aren't truly eating significantly more salt than ever before. We are eating significantly more of these vegetable oils. However, we are not really eating a lot more sugar and carbohydrates since the year 2000, right? Since the year 2000, our consumption of fructose has declined something like 60%, very significant. And our total added sugar consumption has declined a little bit, something like, I think it's between 3 and 10%. And similar declines in our total carbohydrates, I think, thanks in part to all the popularity of the keto diets and high protein diets and, the carnivore diet, stuff like that. So it's making a dent in the carbohydrate consumption, yet not yet a dent in our health. We are still having the same acceleration, really, worse year over year, more obesity, more heart attacks, cancers developing in younger people. So the thing that correlates best is vegetable oils. And since you could say, and I would argue, that because carbohydrates don't correlate with what's been going on for the past 20 years, they should be considered a lesser factor, if a factor at all. Well, certainly there's some factor there, but a lesser factor. So that is the sort of like the basic common sense numerical graphical data level of analysis that hasn't been done. I haven't really seen too many other people pick up on that. I published a graph similar to that in my 2017 book, The Fat Burn Fix. I've seen a couple other people publish similar things since then, but certainly it's not catching on in medicine, and it's not really catching on in the keto community because they haven't noticed that the carbohydrate consumption is level or heading down. So that's that first layer of evidentiary value. But getting back to the first principles, the root cause of the metabolic disease. So one of the studies that really helped me understand what's going on came from Dr. Stefan Guyane, who published an article somewhere around 2011 on his blog first. And he showed that polyunsaturated fats in human body fat have increased significantly since we started collecting that sort of data in a reliable way, which was like the 1950s and 60s. Back then, and does that like resonate with anybody? So I kind of define that. What is that?
Totally.
That come from seed oils.
Yeah, so I think it would be a good point to just point out that polyunsaturated fat, linoleic acid, like this is what's found in seed oils. And you're saying over the past several decades, we've seen a rise in actually human fat that's in our cells as it relates to these polyunsaturated fats.
Correct. In our fat cells, our fat cells under our skin, right?
And so this is being
visceral fat.
this is being stored in our fat, and it stays, I think the research says it stays in our bodies for something like 350 days or something like that. The half-life of linoleic acid is like about 350 days, which you
The
can correct
half-life
that,
of,
but that's
yeah, so the half-life, I don't believe we have specific for linoleic acid data, and it might be less for all the polyunsaturates. But the half-life for just triglyceride fat is what I believe was measured. And that is on the order of exactly what you said. And that means, you need about 3 half-lives to clear something out, more or less. So it would take 3-4 years to clear it all out. But yeah, so what that means is that our diets have changed the composition of our body fat because of these seed oils. And I have to emphasize that, yes, linoleic acid is the dominant one, but it's not the most problematic. So thank God it's not the other way around where we have more omega-3 fat, that our problems would be worse. And I
wow.
talk about that in chapter 1 of Dark Calories, where I talk about why omega-3 is actually less stable. And, the solution to our imbalance is not eating more omega-3 by far. And both of them are toxic. And linoleic acid is not as toxic as the omega-3 in terms of oxidative stress. So for this discussion, I want to focus on polyunsaturates and not just linoleic acid. Yeah. So all that polyunsaturated fat in our body fat has been building up. Okay. So that was one piece of data, this graph that shows that back around 1950s, PUFA in our body fat, PUFA stands for polyunsaturated fats. PUFA in our body fat was around 5 to 10%. And at the end of Stephan Gayane's data collection period in around 2005, it was somewhere between 20 and 30%. Like there was a range depending on what people ate.
Wow.
So, but a significantly higher. That is a significant change to the chemical composition of the largest organ in our body. And again, the obesity experts don't know this. They're not mentioning it. Nothing, not a word mentioned about vegetable oil in any of the obesity conferences that I've either attended or looked over the syllabi for. Nothing, not a word. So that means there's something very different about our body fat right now. And long story short, I'm just going to jump to the chase here. What it is we can build body fat, but because our body fat now has so much PUFA, it doesn't generate energy properly. It's not a good fuel for our mitochondria. And our mitochondria are the agents of metabolic health or metabolic disease because they generate energy, and energy is necessary to life. And metabolic health comes down to being able to generate energy, clean energy, without generating oxidative stress, which causes inflammation. So our body fat now generates oxidative stress and inflammation. And we can build it like normal, but when we try to burn it, our cells will experience more oxidative stress and inflammation.
Wow. So even if, someone's starting to make dietary changes where they're eliminating seed oils and vegetable oils from their diet, they're going to have, in theory, based on this empirical data, higher levels of PUFAs stored in their fat cells. So they still might be going through a period of like I almost don't even want to say detox, but as their body is, burning off that fat that was stored, and then, in theory, not eating any more vegetable oils, they're still going through a process of oxidative stress as that fat is burning off.
Somewhat, yes. And so that is why I think rapid weight loss really sets people up for problems because they're forcing their bodies to use more of this body fat than their body naturally would do if they weren't kind of suppressing their appetite with Ozempic or something like that.
Right.
Yeah, and that's causing cellular damage. And I think we're going to end up seeing a backlash from all these folks who are taking Ozempic and losing weight but not paying attention to vegetable oils, not fortifying their bodies against the onslaught of oxidative stress, which you can and need to do. And I talk about how to do that in Dark Calories.
Mm.
But they're not doing that. They're just losing weight, eating any old thing that they want, most of them. And I think in about 5-10 years, we're going to unfortunately see a new epidemic of strange diseases, autoimmune diseases, perhaps cancers. I don't know what, but I don't think it's going to be good, because it's dangerous to be forcing people to burn off that body fat.
Mm. So in your book, you mentioned that you had a lot of discussions with toxicologists and people who specialize in understanding human genes. And I'm curious what their perspective is on seed oils. Like, how do they approach this conversation? What stands out to them when they look at PUFAs and how our body is really interacting with these chemicals in a way that we really aren't used to?
Yeah, so they have fragmented pieces of the picture, and
Mm.
some of them are not even particularly scientific about it. So I spoke to a gentleman who was 82 and retired, and we talked about peanut oil, just like, is peanut oil different than the other members of what I call the Hateful Eight? Because this is what I needed to know in order to make my list. And he said, yes, indeed, peanut oil is very different. It's much more stable. You don't need to do all the cleanup. It's basically more stable to oxidation, and has to do with breeding, antioxidants, so on and so forth. And then I asked him a tough question. I said, because he seemed really like knowledgeable, but also opinionated, right? And
Mm.
when I say knowledgeable, I guess I mean like he can answer questions. And I'm going to contrast this with someone else that I spoke to, also in the industry. But yeah, he said that I asked about trans fat. I said, do you think it's been a mistake to remove trans fat and replace it with liquid vegetable oils? And he said, absolutely, because those are oxidatively unstable. They will generate toxins, and we'll be eating more toxic stuff. That's why food scientists invented trans fat in the first place, was because liquid vegetable oils are not really suitable for the fryer. But because of the trans fat ban, thanks to places like Harvard and other doctors who don't understand the food supply whatsoever, uh, that we've replaced something that was mildly toxic, but at least stable and didn't deteriorate into aldehydes and acrolein and 4-hydroxynonenal. Trans fat is much more stable. Trans fat has mild toxicity, but it's far less of a serious toxin than the carcinogens that I just listed, which are cancer-causing, massively oxidative stress-inducing agents. So he agreed, yeah, that was a bad move. And, of course, it wasn't his call to make. He's not a doctor. He's not in the American Heart Association. He doesn't make the guidelines. Yeah, I asked him if he would even let me quote him on that. And I still have to write exactly the article I want to write about that so he can review it. But here's the thing, like, he doesn't know about the fact that these things build up in our body fat, right? He doesn't know how much we've been eating necessarily compared to what we did 100 years ago. He doesn't know how they affect our mitochondria. He could guess, but he doesn't really know, because it's not part of his job to study that, right? So I found in talking to these experts that they had their area of expertise, and some of them were better than others. Some of them were not even experts in their area, and I think should be fired from their jobs because they couldn't even answer straightforward questions.
Mm.
And but none of them, they weren't like able to collaborate with doctors or anybody in the health professions, clinical nutritionists. They were never invited into the room. And their field of science is so fundamental to clinical nutrition and preventative medicine that without them, medical science has stalled. And like, that's why I wrote chapter 2, because I'm like, it's not that complicated. You just got to get, ideas from people who understand these different pieces of the puzzle. And then you can start making a lot of sense from your living room in Florida, you know, you don't have to be in some think tank in Washington. You just need some of the facts put together, and you need to care enough to think about it for a while and try to make some sense about it.
Mm. It's such a good point. And I can't help but think that, you know, the system in general is forcing people into specialization and for someone like yourself, you're really able to see the full picture. But it's not surprising to me that so many doctors are missing this as this key piece of why people are running into metabolic dysfunction and chronic disease, seemingly like on repeat, like it's only getting worse. So I think being able to tie these pieces together is really critical. And it does seem like there is a lot of momentum behind this movement of no seed oils, but still, you know, your first book was published in 2009, you said, and we're still, you know, having this conversation. So it's still seems early. And one of the chapters that stood out to me in your book was fat bodies, starving brains. And I think the neurological health and brain health aspect of this is really interesting. So I'd love to just kind of get your take on that chapter and what context people should be aware of when it comes to seed oils and brain health.
Yeah, because actually, I wrote that chapter, and then I found out that a bunch of other doctors, medical doctors in psychiatry, are using a keto diet and talking about how it improves brain energy. And so in chapter 4, I talk about how the fact that these seed oils have changed our metabolism and they're not giving our cells energy. I talk about how that causes something called hypoglycemia symptoms, right? We get like this falling, like we feel like our blood sugar's falling, we get brain fog, we get irritability, and we get this abnormal form of hunger called hangry. That's why I call it starving brains. Our hangry is your brain is having an energy emergency. And that's really important to understand because so many people now experience hangry and they think the solution is, well, I just need a snack. No, the needing a snack is a symptom of the problem. And if you continue to snack, you're not gonna resolve that root problem of oxidative stress. And you are very likely to just gradually gain weight. Like most people who slowly their weight creeps up over their lives, often they are snackers and they have a little snack here, a little snack there. They carry some food around so they can function while they're on the go or at work. And sometimes it doesn't creep up. But the problem is that our brains are starving for energy. We can't use our body fat, so we keep eating. We can build fat that we can't burn. And the solution is we have to be able to start burning our body fat. And so I walk you through the solution to that, which is not to start by losing weight. Like right now, the metabolic health field is dominated by the thought that, or obesity medicine, maybe more than metabolic health, dominated by the thought that being overweight is the problem and all you need to do is lose weight. Doesn't matter how you do it, any diet is going to work because you lose weight on any diet. It's true, you lose weight on any diet, but it doesn't fix the problem that you have body fat that you can't burn. You have less of it, and now you've forced yourself to burn some of it. And gee whiz, this is maybe why we see that people who yo-yo diet have a harder and harder time losing weight every single time, because perhaps they've really damaged their body. They've subjected their cells to oxidative stress. Now they have fewer reserves that help them fight off oxidative stress, which will happen when they burn their body fat. So you have to, you know, they have a harder time burning their body fat. And some very strange things happen when you can't burn your body fat because it's full of oxidative stress inducing fat. A lot of people have told me that they don't want to move, that they will do anything to avoid burning the body fat in their muscles because it makes them feel hot, like they're suffocating. And that's what oxidative stress can do. That is energy being released as heat instead of ATP. You
Mm.
see, so our cells, when they have to burn body fat that they don't want to burn, it's unstable body fat, they can't generate energy. Cellular energy is called ATP, but they can generate free radicals, which release heat. It's like an old car with an inefficient engine that doesn't get the same kind of gas mileage. It'll heat up, it'll run hotter. That's because of oxidative stress. It does the same thing to engines as it does to our mitochondria.
Mm. It's so interesting. I think, when I'm hearing you talk, I'm thinking about friends that I know who are struggling to lose weight, and the multitude of layers that they're struggling with, not only from just like the energy perspective of having less energy to begin with as someone who's carrying extra body fat around, but also somebody who maybe is like just struggling to move because they're as you're saying, like they just don't have that will, or their body is actually heating up to the point where like they're not willing or able to be able to actually go burn that extra weight. So I think
Yeah.
about the layers that it takes to actually really comprehend like getting yourself to a place of true health. And there are all these like shortcuts being thrown out there for people, but what it would take somebody to really reestablish a firm foundation of health these days, it needs to be a slow process. It can't
Yes.
be something that happens overnight. It needs to be small habits that slowly seep into everything that you do. If you want it to be a bedrock of, if you want to get to a point where you have this bedrock of good health and not just be yo-yo dieting for the next 20, 30 years.
Right. So metabolic health comes down to being able to be energized. And the name that we have for well, your friends who are overweight, they have metabolic damage, and they can probably they feel it when when you're saying that they feel like they don't want to move or they're fatigued. That is a sign of metabolic damage. Difficulty losing weight and getting hungry, the sign of metabolic damage. We need to give this metabolic damage a name, and we actually have a name for it. But in order to cure it and understand it better, we need to give it a name. And the name is insulin resistance.
Mm,
And in chapter 3, I talk about my energy model of insulin resistance. And I explain in that chapter why oxidative stress is the root cause of insulin resistance, and why watching your vegetable oils is actually more important than eliminating your carbs down to 0 levels. You can just use healthier forms of carbs, but you don't need to eliminate carbs. And in fact, you may not want to. So there's so much that is changes in our metabolism when vegetable oils have hijacked our metabolism. Basically, they direct us. They make us hungry so often that they direct us, change our tastes. They make us crave sugar. And this is what the chapter Fat Body Starving Brains talks about, is that when you have insulin resistance, you're metabolically addicted to sugar.
mm,
Metabolically addicted. Your cells need it because when they burn sugar, they can get more energy than when they burn fat. And some complicated things happen, and in the end, you end up with higher blood sugar levels and higher insulin levels. And eventually we call that type 2 diabetes. But the
yeah.
root cause is oxidative stress, and it doesn't come from carbohydrates or sugar primarily. It comes primarily from the fact that 30% of our calories are vegetable oils, and they
Mm.
promote oxidative stress. And so what was it that like resonated with you in that chapter, the Starving Brains chapter?
Yeah. I mean, it was really the fact that we're kind of setting people up to fail if like their brains aren't getting the energy they need. How they're already starting from a place lesser than somebody who has decent or good health. If the introduction of seed oils is causing their brains not to get what they need in terms of energy, then if they're running into these metabolic issues, it just seems like we're steepening the curve to actually get people healthier through diet and lifestyle intervention. And I think mental health and energy are very closely intertwined, and really speaks to the vim and the energy that you're able to put out into the world. And I just think that the handicap there really is quite sad because, I do think that people who are struggling with health problems, it does take a lot of energy to then start to implement some of these changes. Like habit formation is not an easy feat for a lot of people. We're reprogramming and unprogramming habits that you've formed over decades potentially. And so the mental energy that it takes to just form those habits is a lot. So I think that that handicap that people who might have just gotten used to consuming a lot of seed oils and now it's disrupting their metabolism, I think it's really alarming. And I think that your chapter here like really hits the nail on the head.
Yes, it is, it does, like, I like what you said, like they're deprived, right? What is a good day? Like, how do you feel when you wake up full of energy, right? Compared to how do you feel when for maybe it's just lack of sleep, don't have energy. But
Right.
if you have lack of sleep and you have this damage to your metabolism, you're going to have just kind of a worse day every single day, right? So if you wake up full of energy, you feel like you can take the world on, at least for that little day. You don't dread the little things. You're like, yeah, no problem. And life throws you curveballs, but when you have energy, you can just handle it. You can roll with the punches. But when you don't have energy, everything is just so hard to deal with mentally. You can't sometimes even process, right? So some people who are completely normal weight have these problems. What I found when I was doing the research for this book was that 99+% of people in America are insulin resistant. That means everybody's got this metabolic damage, just about everybody who
Right.
isn't like a seed oil avoider for, either because they know about it or because they just love cooking and or they're rich, right? And someone else cooks good food for them. But the vast, vast majority of people have this insulin resistance, and that includes normal weight people. So insulin resistance makes you gain weight. It's not the other way around, which is what the way doctors talk about it now, that being overweight is the cause of insulin resistance. So all we need to do is lose a little bit of weight and we start to see some metabolic health improvements. But they don't keep going. You can't lose the rest of the weight, right? You can see a little bit of weight because mostly what I think the most I'm referring here to studies on weight loss that show you can improve your blood pressure, you can somewhat improve your blood sugar, you can somewhat improve your body composition with weight loss by any means. But usually weight loss by any means is cutting out a little bit of the seed oils. Because people going on a diet at their doctor's advice, they usually cut out the chips and the fast foods and the cracker snacks and stuff like that, and they try to upgrade their diets a little bit. So they are cutting out the seed oils. They're also certainly trying to cut out the sugar. But the point I want to make in that chapter 4 with fat bodies, starving brains is that if your brain doesn't have energy, you're going to crave energy in the fastest form that you can get it, and that is usually sugar, sugary foods and beverages. And I think this is why moms who have children who have been fed seed oils, not mom's fault, doctors don't help them with this. So children have been basically raised on seed oils and infant formula and toddler formula, which are made out of these things, and then all the snack foods, seed oils. And then they're also told, oh, your kid is overweight now, you need to stop the soda. But that child has a meltdown between meals if he doesn't get soda. So the mom is in this place where, like, you're telling me I can't give my child something I think he needs because his behavior is all offline. And that's the point of fat body, starving brains. It's not just us, our age people trying to work or trying to intentionally diet. It's affecting kids. And it's changing their relationship with food, and it's driving their parents and their families crazy because they don't understand the problem, and neither does their doctor. They can't
Mm.
explain this crazy behavior and why their children are so insane for sugar. But I just explained it in that chapter. So it is explainable, and there's something you can do about it besides, listen to more screaming and have your doctor finger wag at you.
Well, what I think is so powerful about this chapter in the book in general is what you're hitting on here is talking about how health changes our perception of the world around us. So it isn't necessarily just about these seed oils being bad for us in the sense of making us like fat and look bad. It's these are actually causing us to interact with the world in a different way, show up in relationships in a different way, because your brain is now tied to an entirely different metabolic system. And it's not one that's promoting good health. It's one that's actually not getting you the energy that your body is accustomed to receiving over decades and centuries of biological like our biological makeup and just how we're designed. So to me, it's so much more than just health in this entire conversation. And this is like what Brett and I talk a lot about on the show, is getting your health in order is a cornerstone moment for people to then be able to show up in their life and live with intention and go pursue the things that they want to pursue and be around and influence the people that they want to be able to influence, whether it's their kids, their wives, their wife, their immediate family. Like there's so many benefits from getting your health in order. And this one to me, just it's this one that I think just sits at the center of everything, where we're talking about how do we get our energy and where are we getting our energy from? And that's changed.
I'm glad you think so. So yes, because that's why I called it the energy model of insulin resistance, because energy is at the center of how we interact with people in our lives. Lack of energy, what is it? What do we call it? Like when a child needs their nap, right? That's a meltdown. They have all kinds of behavioral, like, he's normally a good child. I don't know why he's behaving this way. Oh, he didn't get his nap. And what do? Very often you can give them some sugar, right? That's energy, right?
Mm.
Children do need their naps, but they need them more desperately. And the seed oil thing affecting children, I think, is a big, big family problem,
Mm.
because it makes it hard to get children healthy food, and it makes children like little addicts, like they're manipulating their parents to get them the sugary fix that they literally need in order to function like
Mm.
like the way they want, in order to not feel bad. They need their sugar fix, and they will manipulate their parents, so they will have meltdowns in public, right? I mean, it's just how this has changed the parent-child relationship. I mean, I think we kind of see it in the fact that now, how many parents eat the same foods as their children? Their children are running the show.
Right.
And a lot of
Totally.
those foods are going to be the starchier, quick energy foods. So the plan in the back of Dark Calories, the last third of Dark Calories, put on your own oxygen mask first. Start getting yourself to where you feel energy. Follow the plan yourself first. But as much as you can get your children to get on board, it's going to pay itself back in spades, because they'll be behaving better. You'll be able to handle them better, right?
Mm.
So it's just it's the opposite of a vicious cycle where where people are trapped now, right? The lack of energy leads them to processed foods, more vegetable oils, more refined carbohydrates. That's a vicious cycle. That's the processed food industry having American consumers exactly where they want them.
Mm.
That's a vicious cycle. It also leads you to the doctor with all kinds of symptoms that they can then throw drugs at you to treat. So the drug company really likes this too. But the virtuous cycle will free you from all of that. And it will give you, it all starts with getting energy and
Mm.
getting the healthy fats in your diet, and learning the few other strategies that will help your body recover from the metabolic damage that it has right now due to seed oils, as quickly and as easily and as deliciously, hopefully, as possible.
Mm. I love that. Was there anything that you found in your research or in the process of writing this book on prenatal? Like if a mother is consuming vegetable oils, is there anything at play there where like it's affecting the health of the baby or anything like that? You just made me think of that as you were talking about, taking care of your children, like even before you have your child and you're actually, in that prenatal phase, like is there negative effects there? I'm sure there is, but I'm curious if you found anything.
Yeah, as far as evidence for that. So theoretically, you would predict based on this first principles approach, you can make predictions. If something increases oxidative stress, it's going to increase the states of disease with pregnancy, with fetal development. It's going to reduce the capacity for health. So you would certainly predict that. So do you see any evidence of this? Well, yes, they have actually done animal studies because they can't do this sort of thing in humans, where they've fed, adult female mice food that's been adulterated with oxidized oil, like the kind of stuff that we would get when we eat chips, right? It's just that they stir the oxidized oil into the mouse chow instead of feeding mice chips. They just use the same kind of oil.
Mm,
And so that is, arguably that's the worst of the worst stuff. And so if anything, we're going to cause visible results, it would be that stuff. And do you see visible results? Yes. You see serious brain development disorders in when these female mice give birth. And that is whether or not they continue eating that same diet. It's worse if they continue. And it's regardless of what the mice eat, because the mice are, still weaning. So they're just doing the breast milk mostly, and they get normal chow. So you see like encephalomalacia, which is maldevelopment of the brain and all kinds of neurological problems where they can't walk, they don't learn how to socialize, they don't learn how to groom properly, they can't learn anything. So like this is an extreme example because they fed them really the worst of the worst stuff. But you think about that and you think about all of the, what are we supposed to call them now? Not neurotypical children, right?
yeah.
The children with autism and Asperger's and other sorts of learning disorders that are new, never been seen before,
Mm,
not well defined. That is a parallel. Like, how can that not be like a causative thing there that
right.
would affect us? And then there's other somewhat, more circumstantial evidence, because like I say, you can't do these sorts of randomized controlled trials in humans. But we do know that women who have preeclampsia or prediabetes or obesity, they are all subject to more oxidative stress, and their children are all at higher risk of pretty much every bad outcome. They will be small for gestational age. They will have increased rates of autism, increased rates of developmental disorders, increased rates of premature birth, increased rates of birth defects, and on it goes. It's an enormous problem, and it's preventable. And forget about like the past. Moving forward, we can stop it. This is an actionable, right? There's all kinds of horrible things that are going on in society right now. We've been lied to on so many levels. We've certainly been lied to about fat. We've been, people have come on the air after I've made some waves out there about vegetable oils, and people have come on the air to lie and correct, air quotes, scare quotes, the record. Right, Dariush Mozaffarian from Tufts came on to defend
Mm,
oils after I was on Bill Maher back in 2022. So they are lying to you.
mm,
And in order to protect your health and your family's health, you need to realize that we are living in a war zone. The war is on our health at the cellular level. And we need to have that mindset. But it is something that we can do. It's very simple. You just stop eating the seed oils, and I teach you what to eat instead. There's plenty of alternatives. And yes, there's habits you have to change. And yes, you will feel like your life will have to revolve around food for a little while you're changing those habits. But once they become habits, then they're habits and it's not hard anymore. And everyone who does that tells me exactly that.
Mm. I just love your perspective on this. I think thinking about things from the cellular level in terms of how it's impacting everything is just, it's a thread line that I don't think a lot of doctors are making. And so I love the fact that you're not only identifying that as a big problem, but also saying, hey, like these seed oils are actually part of the big problem here. And then you give a playbook on how to actually overcome that and start making some of these changes. One of the things that you hit on that I would love to talk about was really just the information battle that we're fighting right now. And I do feel like we're entering this new age of information with artificial intelligence and all these new AI models that are out there. And what I find interesting is I can type in "are seed oils bad" into ChatGPT or any other AI tool, and I'll get an answer that seems to be very much in line with what, you know, the standard conventional doctor is going to be saying about seed oils. And where we're at with the internet and where we're at with the power of AI, I think it just creates this propensity for these messages to get to compound at a rate that they've already been compounding up until this point. And now these tools are going to be able to get so much more powerful and spread information that might not be true at a much more profound rate. So I'm curious, how do you think the truth actually ultimately ends up getting to the surface here?
Well, I have to say that like it has already somewhat, and I hope it will continue. And when I say it has already somewhat, I mean, my husband goes to shop at Costco now. He sees avocado oil, spray. He never used to see that. Coconut oil, pan spray, cooking spray, right? That used to all be vegetable oil. He used to see just rows of canola, corn, soy, the whole row. There was no avocado oil. There was very little coconut oil. So it has changed. Now, granted, a lot of that took place in the early, because I think a lot of the publicity that happened around seed oils when I was with the Lakers is in the early like 2010s. And then a lot of influencers who are not robots were started talking about it. And now we have to deal with the robots. So what do we do? Well, I think the answer is doctors, because I believe that a lot of, especially the primary care doctors, because we went into medicine because we do care about like what is actually causing our patients their disease. Like we're the detectives that have to sort it out, right? We hand people off to cardiologists when we know there's something wrong with the heart already. But primary care, and also we didn't go into it to get rich, like, some of the subspecialists who make $10 million a year. So we went into it because we like to do the right thing, at least a certain portion of primary care doctors. And I really think that helping doctors get access to this book, to the kind of information that you share and your company probably shares, right? It helps people share, helping doctors learn, reshaping medical education a little bit. And that's already happening somewhat, at least with the metabolic health movement. But again, that's all about keto and carbohydrates, and seed oils are an afterthought. And it's, not ideal, but still it's, moving in the right direction, at least.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah, I think your book is gonna be one of those pieces that people will go back and really be able to pull on, and hopefully inspires a lot more doctors who are the source of information for so many people to start getting this information in front of their patients so that they can make some of these changes. So I personally really appreciate all the work that you've done on this front. It's been decades in the making. I know you and your brother were working on deep nutrition long before 2009, and just the work that you have been doing in primary care and seeing all the different problems that people are having. So for you to actually go through the process of creating materials for people to go deeper themselves, I think is truly a testament to who you are, but also just so empowering. Like, I think giving people the information, the tools, the resources to start making these changes is the best thing that we can do. So truly appreciative of all the work that you've put in for this book.
Well, thank you. And it's my husband. He was the co-writer on Deep Nutrition.
Oh,
Yeah,
sorry,
we have the
husband.
same last name. Yeah, that he took my last name. That's why.
I love it.
My brother helped with the illustration, so I get a whole family involved.
The whole family affair. I
Yeah.
love it. Well, Dr. Cate, where's the best place for people to find more about what you're up to with Dark Calories and all the other projects that you're working on?
So my website really is the nexus of Dr. Cate information, and it's drcate.com, which is drcate.com. And please sign up for my newsletter, which you can do at the big orange button up there that says free resources or subscribe. They're got to changing it. Hopefully it'll be changed by the time this book comes out to just subscribe. And once a month or so, I will tell you what I've been up to, just so that you know about new resources that I've created to help people adopt this sort of healthy lifestyle in a world that doesn't want them to eat right or stay out of the doctor's office. Yeah, that's my mission.
I love it. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate you coming back on the show. And yeah, I'm really excited to see how this book turns out and how it lands. I know it will do incredibly well. So thank you so much for coming on.
Well, thank you. And thank you for your support.
Awesome.